is from PixelBush. Here's the link in the description to that, because this content is brought to us by someone else who's a very talented and awesome content creator. So we're making a react to them, so you should support the official release of said video by clicking that link and hitting the like and subscribe. It's in the chat right here for you on Twitch. If you're on YouTube, it's always in the description below. If you don't do this, this makes you a massive jerkwad, and I absolutely hate you, and I hope bad things happen to you in life. Yeah. This video is about DBD's new tone system being a mistake. So, yeah, I don't know. That's an intro. It's the best it gets, okay? You're gonna tell me you suck and you're terrible. I mean, I hear it down in comments all the time anyway. Like, I'm still going, and it's not gonna stop me. So, let's get into the video, I guess.
Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers. Let's sit around the campfire together and talk about Dead by Daylight. Specifically, the brand new tome system coming in with the next DBD mid-chapter, and the implications it has on this game's wider approach to storytelling. A new mid-chapter has landed, and after a controversial PTB period, the Tools and Torment mid-chapter looks like the biggest meta shake-up in the game's history. Most generation perks are all but dead.
And I will say that, like, after playing it for 4.5 hours today, pretty fun. I had a pretty good time today. I was, like, happily surprised that, like, it didn't feel like the world was ending. Like, I actually had a pretty good time today. It was a good day on the game. Like, the big things that were scary were base kit health and just, like, completely nuking Hillbilly from orbit. And they walked those back, so, like, I fought a Billy today. I remember the last time I ran into a Billy playing Survivor. It was super fun. Like, it's like, they fixed the biggest issues. So...
dead in the water. Medkits have been nerfed at long f***ing last.
Yeah.
Circle of Healing is beaten to death with a rock and all of...
That's what I was surprised about. Circle, I had Circle in a lot of my games today. Actually pretty helpful. The heal speed is actually pretty nice. And I was like, oh, I thought this perk was dead. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting.
All of this means twins are back on the menu, boys. But while Billy mains and healing enthusiasts are rejoicing about behaviour's positive reception to community feedback this patch, there is one change that's still happening in this mid-chapter that I think is a big mistake. And not only was it always going to be in this mid-chapter, but there's basically no hope in changing it in the short term. It's coming, and it'll be here for a while, if not forever. The tome system is changing, and there's two components to that change. The first being that the Deep Rift cosmetics are going to be made more visually distinct from the cosmetics in the regular Rift track, which I guess is, like, fine, but since we haven't seen what those changes are going to be, the proof of the pudding, I guess, will be in the unlocking. But the big change was a lead that behaviour elegantly buried at the bottom of the dev update. Going forwards, all original new characters will receive tome stories the mid-chapter after their release. This applied to the Knight and Vittorio, it will apply to Skull Merchant and the Lyra siblings, and it will apply to all future original chapters.
Okay.
When a licensed chapter comes out, they may get a tome, but odds are they won't, and it'll instead feature existing original characters. The update also notes that older characters were involved in the tomes as well as minor characters, but in terms of the actual meaning of that phrase, we don't know. Most of this video is going to be talking about the implications that new characters getting tomes immediately is liable to have on the quality of the stories, but before I do, I want to talk briefly about these older characters. Survivors and killers who haven't received tomes yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. Fang Min, one of the most popular survivors in the game, does not have a tome. That's so weird. Like, I really don't care about her at all. Personally, sorry, that's gonna offend a lot of people, I guess. I don't really care about her at all, but, like, she is, regardless if you like her or hate her, one of the most popular survivors in the game. And she just doesn't have a tome. It's just odd. It's just really strange. I feel like it's just, like, super obvious.
Who many of us expected would get starring roles in upcoming future tomes.
What was the theory then? 4
original killers are as of yet unaccounted for in tomes. Oni, Deathslinger, Artist, and Dredge.
That's criminal. I'm in the way. Sorry. Hold on. Let me move my face so I can point angrily. That's criminal. Oni has some of the best original lore in the game. Oni has a fantastic original lore. How does he not have one? That's something. That's something. Oni is one of their coolest opening, like, coolest original characters in terms of his lore, and he just doesn't have one? That's crazy. I wonder why they're winning. That's true. That's true. They're trying to make it intentionally vague so people can make her whatever she wants, which is, you know, yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. No Rins, but TLDR, he's actually straight up a samurai. Like and he lives in the dying age when samurai were kind of going out the door and trying to like very desperately struggling to keep his honor and maintain like that lifestyle. But, you know, he is a very brutal and angry man. So obviously that doesn't really go well for him. And the entity ends up mocking him and making him into an Oni or like a demon in his, like once he gets taken into his realm, because it's like an honorless thing that's just, you know, amounting him just to this big rage monster when he was always trying to like prove that, you know, no, this is the old ways and this is still important and I'm an honorable and good man, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's very, very interesting.
While 7 survivors are also missing tomes. Feng Min, Adam, Jeff, Zarina, Felix, Elodie, and Hattie. These characters were leading characters.
And this is wild. Like, I'm not about to go off about Jeff because, you know, he's my favorite. That's a biased take. But, like, how do Felix and Elodie, who, if you read their lore, are incredibly important to the macro lore of Dead by Daylight, not have a tome? Felix and Elodie are, like, super plot important. Super plot important. And they don't have a tome. Like, what? It's so weird.
Tome stories. But with the announcement, this dream is pretty much crushed, at least as far as we're aware. Needless to say,
this is also
pretty
important?
Disappointing.
Maybe they
Feng Min and Oni especially have been waiting a very long time for tomes, and this is any indication they're going to be waiting a hell of a lot longer. How long that may be depends on the definition behaviour has of minor character, because this could mean that the new tomes have extra stories in them for older characters, kind of like the tomes between 2 and 6 that had 3 or 4 characters instead of 2. However, there is a pretty high chance that when behaviour says minor characters, it means older characters getting cosmetics in the Rift Pass and saving their stories until licensed chapters.
Yeah, I do need to
that would mean we wouldn't get through our 4-killer backlog for 2.5 to 3 years. I wouldn't get through all the survivors until at least 2028, 5 years from now.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I'm not ready to wait until I'm almost in my 30s for a Hattie tome to come out.
Yeah.
And I think that's unreasonable to expect a story for an existing important character in good time.
Or if the game even lasts that long. What if the game has another catastrophic issue like the NFT thing with Pinhead that made a lot of people quit the game? Like, what if the game just dies before then? Like, oh, that's spooky.
Think of the chance of going back to give original characters second tomes to further flesh them out. This has only ever happened once before, to be fair, but it made David a significantly more interesting and compelling character, and it would be a massive shame if a dogmatic adherence to a new story policy took that possibility off limits. Fortunately, it's something that behaviour at least seems aware of. Comments by lead community manager Death by Giggles assert that they're at least aware of concerns around older characters getting tomes, and this is likely to be addressed at some stage. So, in a very dangerous turn of phrase, let's give behaviour the benefit of the doubt, and assume that the minor character disclosure or whatever means these forgotten few will get stories of their own in the tomes in good time, and we're waiting until the heat death of the universe to finally read a story about Jeff and his little dog.
Yes! Jeff and his dog and his art and his stinky little blockbuster job, I want it. I want it. Jeff has a good backstory, too, about, like, dealing with depression, falling into alcoholism, trying to, like, you know, cope and often failing to. Like, there's a lot there you could go into besides just cool metal man, you know? There's a lot you can go into.
As for all the old characters in potential second tomes, I still think this change is an absolute disaster for intelligent storytelling. I'm going to tell you why. But before we continue, I want to introduce you to today's partner, ExpressVPN.
ExpressVPN!
As the threat of DDoS attacks against Dead by Daylight players continues to rear its ugly head, it's never been a better...
Didn't you say it wasn't DDoS attacks? Didn't you say it was not DDoS attacks in your last video? Didn't you spend a whole video talking about how you didn't think it was actually DDoS attacks that they were using to kick people off their internet last time? Wait. What?
Time to invest in VPN to protect yourself and your data from attackers. ExpressVPN puts your browsing data through their servers, leaving you safely encrypted and free to browse the web from any of their server locations. This not only protects your data from government or corporate surveillance, but allows you to access region-locked content from anywhere in the world. I like to
Sorry,
use
everybody was
news articles
watching this
and
video
things
in the
like that,
dark.
but it's just as handy for streaming services too.
Your eyes are
Especially
burning.
Bran here with an exciting new deal so you can get in on the action. Sign up now for ExpressVPN and get 3 months
homie
free
just
in
cooked
the
your
link in the
eyes.
description and in the
It's
pinned
not
comments.
flashback.
Now back to the video. To demonstrate the issue I have with the new tome system, I want to illustrate to you exactly what makes a truly good tome story, to show you how a tome released immediately after a killer or survivor might struggle to be there. And showcase a good tome story, I want to look at the hillbilly story A Man Named Boy that came out in Tome 5. As one of the 3 OG killers, Billy's original story was extremely underdeveloped. It set up who Billy was.
Yeah, because Billy was just in the game to be an homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He was supposed to be rip-off Bubba, so you could have somebody kind of like Bubba that you could play in Dead by Daylight, because they didn't do the whole like Smash Brothers thing yet. They didn't have licensed killers. That wasn't a thing. So the best they could possibly get is like ripping off, making rip-off characters. So that's all he needed. But they ended up actually like getting IPs and stuff, and they actually got actual Bubba. So like, you know, probably define this guy a little more. Yeah.
This child who got revenge on his tormentors, but didn't really do anything else at all. It got people on Billy's side emotionally, because we naturally feel sympathy for abuse victims, but it didn't tell us much about the way he thinks and feels. Like, how conscious is he of what's happening to him? Does he have communication issues that alienate him from his family? What even did he escape with, and what made him do so now rather than before? These are all questions that we sat with for years before A Man Named Boy answered all of them with
Got the
amazing
FPS.
attention to
DBD
detail and
maxes out at
sensitivity
120.
towards Max's
DBD on cap, it
imprisonment
only
and
goes
abuse
to
at his
120.
parents' hands. Max's story turned out amazing because it addressed everything we didn't know about the killer and filled in gaps that had occurred naturally in the story over time. No one bio can ever be fully complete, no matter how long it is. And A Man Named Boy fleshed out a character who just hadn't aged well up until that point.
Nope.
Crucially, it could only do this because Billy's lore was so old, and there was a significant gap between the base lore and the tome being written. We, as readers on the Behaviour's writing team, had years to understand this story and the holes in it, to get a sense of what worked and what needed to be expanded in a tome. This isn't something that's easy to figure out. It takes time for the DBD community, especially those of us invested in the lore like me, to really get to know a character and figure out what might be missing or what needs fleshing out. The best tomes work with the existing perception of the character and do something interesting with it. A new spin to create a more stereoscopic view of that character.
Ooh,
and
big
their
word,
relationships.
stereoscopic. Woo.
Talbot is presented as a emotionally detached mad scientist who gives into an alternate persona as the Blight. The human quotient tome story comes in to alter that perception, making him more conscientious and even giving him a love interest. Adiris is presented as a potentially egotistical or vain figure in her refusal to accept what happens to her. Turn that on its head in the Maiden Guard by giving her someone to look up to in her barn and explore how that unbreakable faith first came about. They have to both subvert the way the character was originally presented to give us something new to work with, and give us some consistency that lets us know that it's still the same character that we knew and loved from the beginning. This causes an issue with making a tome for brand new characters on their release, because these stories will be written at the same time as the base lore, or very, very close to it. Meaning nobody knows what elements of the character work or not. The writers are going in blind, and that reduces the chances of that story coming out the other side actually being worthwhile and answering the questions it needs to answer.
I think there's another thing too, is like fans come up with a lot of interesting and cool theories, just not even in Dead by Daylight, but in media in general. And a lot of what writers will do in other medias is actually kind of incorporate parts of what fans have theorized or liked into the stories themselves. And with this, there's not really going to be a chance to do that, like at all, you know?
Let's look for an example here.
Yeah,
as a
Behavior definitely
character
retcon
whose
stuff.
base lore is widely considered to have missed the mark, and could do with a touch-up in a tome. There's a placeholder image on screen to represent such a character. Instead of relying on community feedback and reception of the character to inform the way the story is written, Behavior's writers are instead going in more or less blind, relying on guesswork and their own judgment to decide what course the story should take. The same judgment that led to the mediocre story in the first place.
Yep.
You see the problem here? Even if Skull Merchant's new tome coming up does do the miracle work and fixes her lore problem that Trixter's tome did, a dangerous precedent is still set for how future character stories get treated, because if that happens, suddenly it becomes okay to half-ass the stories of new characters because you can just fix it in the tome that comes later and it'll all be fine.
True.
If I was being really cynical, I'd even say that stories like hers that have obvious gaping holes in them may even be written this way intentionally to give the character something to immediately write a tome about. Not to mention, if the tome story turns out bad, you've just burned your one shot.
Because essentially what tomes are is like you're telling the same story twice, and you gotta find something to do with that like fleshes it out. Right, you gotta find something that fleshes it out. Like, because you when the character comes out, you tell their story initially, just in that large bio text page that comes with every character. But if that's like fully fleshed out and already perfect, what's the point of having a tome? Right? And what's the point of having a tome? Because the tome is just going to retell parts of that you already know. So I see what he's saying, where it's like, this may encourage them to make a flawed story or an incomplete story just so they can, make the tome more appealing. Which is, yeah, Yui is a very good survivor with very good lore. That's why she's my 5th favorite survivor. Yeah, I like her a lot.
This character's lore not a fest, because you went in too early and wrote the story without receiving any feedback. If the story's bad, it's a waste of time. And if the story's good, why wasn't this improvement in the base lore to begin with?
Exactly. It's left out on purpose so they can make the... it would be left out on purpose so they can make the tome. So they can make the tome.
If you cut it, it's just not fair. On the people who like these new characters to only give us half a story when the full one's already been written and has been split up into a tome. Just give us the whole character straight up and develop them further in a tome later, or the Skull Merchant's new tome is good or not is barely relevant, because whatever happens, it sets a bad precedent for future stories to follow, and will result in the cheapening of this game's lore and storytelling. I don't know about you, but I'm not taking that line down. You might think I'm scaremongering or whatever, but there's no speculation to be had here. This has already happened, because the Forged in Fog tome has demonstrated what I mean perfectly. Knight and Vittorio both had elements missing from their base stories. Knight didn't have a developed relationship with his comrades in arms, despite them being a massive part of his identity overall. And Vittorio...
Find out in the sequel! It's sequel baiting! That's what it is! It doesn't occur to me. It's sequel baiting. Find out in the tome! You got any questions? You got any questions from the normal lore? Find out in the tome! It's sequel baiting. That's what it is.
Here it left a big gap in his lore between his departure from Port Oscuro, where he looked like a medieval lord, and his appearance in the Entity's realm, where he looked like a Dilfier John Bon Jovi.
Yep.
The tome they got immediately after their release didn't really help either of these issues, and as a result it made the stories way less interesting. Tardosh's story was right, I guess. It was fun to read, but didn't really expand his character or relationships whatsoever. And Vittorio's was totally expected, finishing his story by filling in the blanks from his base lore in the most colouring by numbers way possible, but did nothing interesting with it whatsoever. That's actually why I haven't covered Vittorio's tome in a video yet, because there's nothing of interest in there at all. Both of these stories were defined by not doing anything exciting, because the characters in question were so new, the writers were still getting to grips with them, and it made the tome pretty forgettable. And what's worse is, if you were not someone who particularly enjoyed these characters, having the tome following their release also being about them alienates a lot of players because of nothing but Forged in Fog content for 3 months straight. Normally the mid-chapter tome can be a breather for people like me who feel kind of mediocre on a character's release sometimes, and reading a story about an old character that you might actually like is a breath of fresh air to keep things interesting. For original characters going forwards, that's never going to happen again. Meaning if you have a character who wasn't received very well and has a niche following, a second story for them immediately is just going to fatigue people even more, regardless of if the story is even good or not.
Yep.
Not only
especially with a character like Dull Merchant Knight, who like people are already not wanting to see because they're not fun to face. Having an entire tome dedicated to them just means that we're going to have to, like, it's a double whammy, right? It's going to be a resurgence of playing a character that was already not fun to face, or in some cases not fun to play. It's going to be a whole resurgence of that all over again. They're making us go through it twice, which is not great.
Characters who need a story touch-up go down when a tome for them is written immediately. The very existence of that immediate tome story risks alienating and boring people who don't find the new content appealing. That's a problem that DBD already has during the 3-month break between new chapters, and it's only going to get worse if that means even more killer challenges, skins, and stories in new tome releases for these brand new characters. I don't see a reason why this change should be done from an artistic standpoint. Almost objectively, the stories are going to be worse, and the writers having less time and feedback to work on them. And it'll exhaust players who don't care for the new content on top of that. It's just perplexing because I don't see what the appeal of this is. Well, actually, I kind of do.
It's to sell the Rift. It's to sell the Rift.
And I hate to say it, but it's money.
Yep.
By making it clear that all original characters will be in Rifts and Tomes after their release, Behaviour is saying to players, buy our original chapter and do it quickly.
Yep.
To do the challenges, you'll need the survivors and killers, you'll need the perks, so you may as well get them now, so by the time it comes out you can grind the stuff you need to complete the Rift. Pushing these Rifts and therefore the stories that come with them up in urgency pushes players to buy these chapters quickly, potentially trading quality for a fear of missing out. And that's so
fear of missing out. Yep, there it is.
There it is. The quality of the stories at the end worse. To be fair, I can see why they're doing it. Big licenses like the RE release make big bucks. And I'll bet you in recent years, original chapters haven't been making the same kinds of money they used to.
Oh no.
I'm discounting the last 2 chapters because they're too new to influence this decision, but looking at the last couple of years of original releases, the only ones I can imagine selling really well were Descend Beyond, All Kill, and maybe Hour of the Witch.
Yeah. So like Michaela, Blight, and I forget the third one you list there, but like Michaela and Blight are like the last ones I was like, people like actually like, you know, were like, oh, that was pretty cool, and got excited about that. Fixter, that was more because of the involvement with like the K-pop industry. So it's kind of them just like making money off. It's kind of like not a license, but it's kind of like a pseudo license in a weird way. Vaguely K-pop is the license, right? So,
Roots of Dread, Binding of Kin, Portrait of a Murder. These chapters probably didn't sell very well, signalling to the higher-ups at Behaviour that original chapters need to sell better. Something the poor receptions of Forge and Fog and Tools of Torment probably back up. One of the ways they're doing this is by changing the tomes to keep these new chapters more relevant for longer. This is a smart decision from a business perspective, but it comes from an accidental or possibly purposeful disdain and disregard for the quality of these chapters' stories, and that makes me a very sad boy.
Which one I played? Which one?
The Forge and Fog tome stories have shown me what the future of DBD's original story content looks like. Writers staggering around in the dark, trying to expand characters that haven't really settled down yet. Trying to second-guess feedback before it can come, and working to a tighter deadline than normal. Look, I can't pretend this isn't going to make Behaviour more money from these rifts. It's going to happen whether we like it or not, and that makes changing it a very hard sell, especially understanding how far in advance tomes are planned out. The next 2 or 3 tomes are probably already drawn up. Which characters are included, what skins they're getting, maybe even the stories themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to suggest scrapping this policy altogether because it just isn't going to happen. They've already committed, the ink has dried, and by the time we could have said something about it, it's already too late. But there is one thing they could do that's a pretty low opportunity cost for Behaviour, and would almost completely resolve the issues of an instant release tome model, like the neglect of older characters, the writing issues that come with instant tomes, and content fatigue introduced by 3 solid months of the same characters.
Yep.
I think some of the extra money Behaviour's making from the original chapters and rifts should be put to use expanding the number of stories in a tome release from 2 to 3. I suggest alongside the new original Survivor and Killer, a 3rd tome story should be written for every mid-chapter going forwards, either for an older character who hasn't had a tome story yet, or a 2nd tome story for a character who may have already had one. Call it a legacy story if you like. A bone to throw for appreciators of old and underloved characters who don't get very much to play with very often. Or a character who got stories before, who is maybe due a second look.
Yeah, Nurses was
story
bad.
Every 3 months.
Nurses was bad.
How hard would that be? You guys used to do 4 before, winding back to 2 in Tome 6. 3 isn't unreasonable given how well Behaviour's been doing lately. You can absolutely afford it. The relief of even one survivor or killer getting a story alongside the new guys would be immense. Doesn't mean giving them new skins of the rest if you don't want to do that, although you could. But all we need is another story to help keep us occupied, and it solves the problem of new characters potentially getting undercooked stories too. If the new story for Skull Merchant or Dalita or whoever on release is missing something, you can just wait a year and put them in the legacy slot in a later tome, because your release schedule has enough flexibility now to let you experiment, and revisit characters you've already looked at. In general, I'd love to see greater emphasis on old characters getting second tomes in this slot, because between the legacy slot and the licensed chapters, there'd be a lot of room to revisit old characters
It's
at
true.
that point.
People are devoted to that character.
Imagine, for example, if we got a Cursed
Very
Legacy
crazy.
style sequel chapter 2 of Flesh and Mud, with the hag's grandmother as a survivor and one of the cannibals who kidnapped her as a killer.
Ooh,
You could throw in a hag story in the legacy slot to tie it all together.
convenient.
Or a licensed release, let us get a Dredge and Hattie tome.
Yeah, chapter
And the
2
legacy
of
slot went to the
original
Doctor,
characters.
to give us more
Interesting.
backstory on Otto Stamper.
Interesting.
So maybe we can see
Never thought
Otto go
about
from
that.
the cult leader he was in the Dredge's story to Herman's deranged mentor at the Institute. There's so much we could achieve if Behaviour added a legacy tome slot and story to each new tome release. And yes, it would require more work from Behaviour, but if they're asking more from us, more money to complete the rifts each time by pushing us to buy each new chapter to complete them, they need to give something back to us. And if this decision is going to make the stories we do get worse, the least we can do is expect some sort of recompense.
Yeah.
You gotta spend money to make money. And retaining the interest of hardcore lore whores like me and the people watching this video probably is worth that.
Player retention is not their strong suit. Player retention is not their strong suit. We have found. Realistically, yes, that'd be great if they would do this, but we have seen over the course of their track record, they are very bad at retaining players. Very bad at retaining their longtime players, so.
That investment. One bonus story every 3 months. How hard could that be? It's such a minor request for what could be a truly excellent, refreshing
Yeah, y'all are
addition to
here.
the tome model
Y'all are here
that
going
soothes
like,
the
"Yep, that's
concerns
me."
of players whose characters may not be due
Case in
for a
point.
tome for years otherwise. I don't think that's too much to ask, do you?
Nope.
So that's everything I have to say for now about the new tome story
think you would.
system. What do you reckon? Are you excited? Are you concerned? Do you think I'm being overly worried?
It's funny because like I didn't even think about. I didn't even think about like how that would affect things at all. But like Pixel's right, like that like they're kind of like monetizing it even more than it was already a monetized thing, and making the lore something that is that, like I said, my biggest concern was like, yeah, we're gonna write a complete lore when the character drops. Everybody's gonna criticize the lore, and they're gonna be like, okay, no, we made it fine with the it's fine now. We released a tome, and now the chapter has perfect lore. It's like you should have just sold me the whole thing up front. Like you should have sold me this whole thing up front. Like why did you omit this part just to sell it in the tome lore later? Like it's stupid. That's what I'm afraid of. But I didn't even like think about that as a thing until Pixel pointed it out. I don't really like intensively care about DBD's lore, to be honest. There's some cool stuff that I like, but I'm not like really intensely interested in it. But there are a lot of people that do. A lot of people that are. And that is part of your customer base. And if you're going to be intentionally hurting that for a quick buck, I can guarantee that a lot of people are not going to be happy with you. And really, you know, it's not going to work out. It's not going to work out in your favor like you think it will. Some people are fools. Some people will buy the snake oil, but some people will understand that they're being scammed, and will just, you know, omit themselves entirely. They were just abstained. So, yeah.